He's known as Jack the Ripper. But despite no one knowing his true identity, what we do know is that he was an active serial killer in the impoverished areas of the East End of London back in 1888. And aside from Jack the Ripper, he was also commonly referred to as the Whitechapel Murderer and the Leather Apron. And if he's truly the man behind all three names, he may have been responsible for up to 11 murders. But why was he given those names in specific, you may ask? Stay tuned to the end of the video to find out. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Around the midpoint of 1888, the first female prostitute had been found dead in the slums of the East End of London. Her throat had been cut, and there were what's known as abominable mutilations, where he would essentially remove the organs of the victim. Because of this detail in specific, this led investigators to believe that he may have had a background that involved anatomical or surgical knowledge, since the way it was done was deemed professional. After Jack the Ripper claimed the lives of his first three victims around September and October of 1888, rumors about the case started to intensify, with media outlets receiving countless fake confessions and even fake sightings were being reported at the time too. In one of the letters that were sent out to one of the media outlets, the killer wrote a note and signed it Jack the Ripper, but it's unknown if it was the true killer that actually wrote that note. At the time, it was believed that it might all be a hoax, and that the media outlet might have actually written the note themselves just to shine a light on the case and draw more attention to their articles. But not long after, George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee received a letter from Jack the Ripper that would later be named the From Hell letter. It came with a half of a preserved human kidney, and it was believed that it was one of the organs that were harvested from one of the victims. This was the reason that the name Jack the Ripper actually stuck, since this was essentially his way of claiming the name and verifying that it was indeed him behind everything. But again, in a similar location, just shortly after the first 5 victims were claimed by Jack the Ripper, there was now an additional investigation that was believed to have been linked, where 11 more victims had lost their lives in what was later named the Whitechapel Murders. They spanned from April 3, 1888 to February 15, 1891, nearly 3 whole years. Although opinions varied at the time, and there was quite a bit of controversy around whether or not the Whitechapel murders were truly linked to Jack the Ripper, there are 5 more from the Whitechapel case that authorities are quite certain about. With large, deep slash wounds to the throat, extensive mutilation to the abdominal and genital area, and since multiple organs had also been removed, it made it quite clear that there was a high chance Jack the Ripper was responsible for these victims too. And these 5 victims from the Whitechapel murders would later be named the Canonical Five. The Canonical Five victims are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. On August 31, 1888, Mary Ann Nichols, the first victim of the Canonical Five, was discovered around 3:40 in the morning, and she was last seen alive just an hour before. Her throat was completely severed by 2 deep cuts, and her abdomen was ripped open partially by a deep, jagged wound. There were also a few rips in the side of her abdomen, all of which were caused by the same knife, with the same downward thrusting momentum. About a week later, on September 8, 1888, the next victim was found, Annie Chapman. Near the steps to the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street, her body was discovered around 6 a.m., and her abdomen was completely open. To spare you the details, everything had been essentially reorganized, to say the least. Annie's autopsy also revealed that she had sections of her uterus and bladder completely removed as well. It was a horrific scene. Then came the third victim of the Canonical Five, Elizabeth Stride. Elizabeth was killed in the early hours of the morning, around 1 a.m. on September 30th, 1888. It was a Sunday night when her body was discovered, with one single clear-cut incision across her neck that measured about 6 inches in length. It completely severed her carotid artery and her trachea, and it ended right beneath the right jaw. However, the absence of any other incisions is what sparked the conspiracy that Jack the Ripper may not actually be responsible. On that exact same night, only about 45 minutes after the previous victim, the fourth victim was discovered, Catherine Eddowes. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear, and again, similar to the rest of Jack the Ripper's victims, Catherine's abdomen was also left wide open, with her intestines pulled over her shoulders. Her face had also been disfigured, and there were also multiple organs that were removed. The 2 murders, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, would later be named the Double Event by authorities, since it was the only time that Jack the Ripper ever attacked two separate victims on the same night. On the morning of November 9th, 1888, the fifth and final victim of the canonical five was found, Mary Jane Kelly. She was discovered in her home, lying in the single room where she lived. Mary's face had been hacked beyond recognition, according to officials, and her throat was severed down to the spine. Her abdomen was also left wide open, but this time it had been completely emptied. There were no organs left behind. Upon further investigation, it was also discovered that Jack the Ripper even went as far as to start a fire for himself in her single-room home just so that he could see what he was doing to Mary. Jack the Ripper only attacked his victims during the night, and the mutilations seemed to get more and more brutal as more victims were found, and this is essentially what led the authorities to conclude that all 11 murders were likely linked. They got slightly more brutal every single time. But after more than 130 years later, Jack the Ripper was never found, and it's unclear whether he died, got arrested for a different crime, or if he just decided to stop on his own terms. No one knows what actually happened in this true crime mystery. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, let us know what you think about Jack the Ripper down in the comments below.